To everyone else, Ilara Vance was just remarkably lucky. She was the woman who always guessed the exact number of jelly beans in the jar. The one who stepped off the sidewalk a fraction of a second before a speeding cab jumped the curb. The one who blindly bought a lottery ticket that paid her rent for a year. But Ilara knew it wasn't luck. It was a physical sensation, a warm, magnetic pull in her chest that dictated her every choice. For 28 years, she kept this a secret. She called it her gut feeling. Whenever she ignored it, disaster struck. Whenever she listened, the world seemed to part for her like the Red Sea. She never questioned its origin, content to live a peaceful, serendipitous life in the quiet city of Oakhaven. However, the universe does not grant such flawless instinct without a purpose. Deep within the cosmic fabric, an ancient energy known as the Zeonix was beginning to hum. The Zeonix was not a god, nor was it magic. It was the primordial frequency of truth, the invisible thread that held the multiverse together in perfect balance. For millennia, the Zeonix had been dormant, waiting for a mind pure enough to resonate with its exact pitch. Tonight, the stars aligned in a pattern unseen for 10,000 years. Ilara stood on her balcony, looking up at the night sky. The familiar warmth in her chest suddenly flared into a blinding, agonizing heat. It was no longer a gentle nudge. It was a commanding roar. The whispers of the universe were converging into a single, undeniable truth. She was not just a woman with good instincts. She was the compass of reality. The chosen one of Zeonix had finally awakened, and the shadows lurking in the cosmic void had just felt her pulse. The morning after the celestial alignment, Ilara's world shifted entirely. The subtle tugs of her intuition had transformed into a sensory overload. As she walked into the towering glass structure of her corporate office, her mind didn't just suggest actions, it projected absolute, unavoidable outcomes. "Do not enter the elevator," the silent voice commanded, vibrating through her very bones. Ilara froze in the lobby. Her colleague, Mark, smiled and held the doors open. "Coming, Ilara?" "No," she said, the word tumbling out before she could process it. "Take the stairs, Mark, please." Mark scoffed, shaking his head as he let the metal doors close. 30 seconds later, a deafening screech echoed through the shaft. The main cable snapped, plunging the elevator into the sub-basement. Panic erupted in the lobby as dust billowed from the doors. Ilara stood perfectly still, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a terrifying realization. She hadn't just guessed, she had known. Before she could even process the tragedy, the heat in her chest pulled her violently toward the emergency exit. "Run!" the Zeonix commanded. She burst through the fire doors into the alleyway, just as a tear in reality ripped through the lobby she had just evacuated. It wasn't an explosion, it was a fracture in the air itself, swirling with obsidian darkness. From the rift stepped creatures of fractured glass and jagged shadows, the Null Stalkers. They sniffed the air, their hollow faces turning directly toward the alley. They weren't here for the building. They were hunting the newly awakened pulse. Ilara didn't know what they were, but her intuition delivered a crystal-clear, horrifying instruction. If they touch you, the universe dies. Survive. Ilara sprinted through the labyrinth of back alleys, her body moving on pure, unadulterated instinct. Duck right, leap over the trash can, slide under the fire escape. She didn't think, she merely obeyed the flawless choreography dictated by the Zeonix inside her. She cornered into a dead end, breathless. The shadows melted from the brick walls, forming the jagged silhouettes of the Null Stalkers. As they lunged, a burst of radiant, azure energy shattered the darkness. A towering figure landed gracefully between Ilara and the creatures. He wore armor forged of interwoven starlight and wielded a staff that hummed with the exact same frequency that resided in Ilara's chest. With a sweeping arc, the stranger dissolved the stalkers into shimmering ash. He turned to Ilara, his eyes glowing with ancient wisdom. "I am Kalen, Sentinel of the First Order," he said, kneeling before her. "We have searched across 1,000 galaxies for you. The Zeonix has chosen its vessel." Alora backed away, her rational mind fighting desperately for control. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just an accountant. I just have good instincts. There is no such thing as instinct for you, Kalen replied gently, rising to his feet. What you feel is the Zeonix, the living will of the cosmos. It calculates every probability, every truth, every outcome. It is never wrong. For generations, the universe has been bleeding out, consumed by the null, a force of absolute silence and chaos. You are the chosen one, the only being whose mind can channel the Zeonix without shattering. Your gut feelings were merely practice. Now, the real war begins. Kalen whisked Alara away to a sanctuary hidden miles beneath the city, a crystalline cavern resonating with the same warmth she had felt all her life. Here, he explained the gravity of her existence. The No was led by an entity known as Malachor, the Lord of Silence. Malachor sought to unravel the fabric of reality, and the only thing standing in his way was the Zeonix. To defeat him, you must stop doubting, Kalen instructed as they stood before a shimmering pool of liquid starlight. Your human mind relies on logic, fear, and hesitation. The Zeonix relies on absolute certainty. If you hesitate for a fraction of a second, Malachor will consume you. Alara closed her eyes, trying to separate her own anxious thoughts from the steady, rhythmic pulse of the Zeonix. Can I really do this? She wondered. The familiar warmth surged, wrapping around her heart with a reassuring, powerful embrace. Yes. Suddenly, the cavern shook violently. The crystalline walls cracked, bleeding black, suffocating smoke. The sanctuary's ancient defenses had been breached. The temperature plummeted, and a voice completely devoid of emotion echoed in their minds. Found you. Malachor manifested in the center of the room, a towering figure composed of swirling antimatter. The cavern began to disintegrate around him. Kalen charged, his staff blazing with azure light, but Malachor merely waved a hand. Kalen was thrown backward, crashing into the stone, his light dimming instantly. The universe places its final hope in a fragile, frightened human? Malachor's voice was a sensory void that made Alara dizzy. How pathetic. Alara stood alone, facing the Lord of Silence. Every rational instinct in her human brain screamed at her to flee, to hide, to surrender. But deep within, the Zeonix was perfectly calm. It wasn't a voice of panic. It was a profound, crystalline silence of absolute knowing. Malachor unleashed a torrent of dark matter, a wave of annihilation meant to erase her from existence. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Alara didn't think about dodging. She didn't calculate the trajectory of the attack. She surrendered completely to the intuition that had guided her safely since childhood. She took one step to the left. The dark matter missed her by a millimeter, obliterating the ancient wall behind her. Malachor roared in frustration, sending a barrage of shadow spikes. Alara danced through them. Step right, duck, spin, advance. Her movements were a breathtaking symphony of evasion. She was untouchable, moving in perfect, flawless synchronization with the heartbeat of the cosmos. Stand still and meet your end, Malachor bellowed, gathering all of his dark power into a massive, swirling sphere of absolute zero. The Zeonix flared in Alara's chest, brighter than a supernova. The instruction was clear, defying all human logic. Do not run. Reach out. Alara stepped directly into the path of the dark sphere. She raised her hand, her palm open and fearless. As the annihilation sphere made contact, it didn't destroy her. The Zeonix channeled through her fingertips, a blinding wave of azure truth crashing into the dark matter. The pure frequency of reality rewrote the null. Malachor shrieked in agony as the light consumed him, his shadows shattering into millions of harmless, glowing fireflies. The silence that followed was not the cold, terrifying emptiness of the null, but a peaceful, ringing tranquility. Kalen stirred, rising slowly from the rubble. He looked at Alara, absolute awe written across his battered features. She stood amidst the glowing embers of the cavern, bathed in a gentle blue light that seemed to radiate from her very skin. Alara looked at her hands. The overwhelming roar of the Zeonix had subsided back into a comfortable, steady hum in her chest. But it was no longer a mystery. She understood it now. She wasn't just a passenger relying on lucky guesses anymore. She was the pilot. "It is done," Kalen whispered, bowing his head in profound respect. "The null is broken. The universe is safe." "For now," Alara corrected softly. Her voice carried a strange dual resonance, her own humanity deeply intertwined with the ancient tone of the cosmos. There are other tears in reality, other fractures that need mending. She turned her gaze upward, seeing past the cavern ceiling, past the city of Oakhaven, straight into the endless, breathtaking tapestry of the stars. She could feel the spin of distant planets, the birth of nebulas, the subtle shifts of fate across a billion galaxies. Her intuition was no longer just a shield to protect her from everyday hazards. It was a sword, forged in the fires of creation. Alara smiled, stepping confidently forward into her destiny. The universe had whispered to her all her life to keep her safe. Now it was her turn to speak for it. The chosen one of Zeonix was ready to guide them all.